All right. Hello and welcome to Goal Friday, everyone. I was curious how many people were going to be interested in this particular one. So I'm glad to see that we have some folks here today. I am your host, Sarah Lobkovich, and among the questions I, I am asked most often in my capacity as an enormous goal nerd is what's the difference between acronym A and acronym B? So today we're going to separate out the alphabet soup of goal setting acronyms into its individual ingredients. But first, I'm going to share just a minute, just a little tiny bit of context, because I'm going to use some examples today that aren't your typical business examples. So let me get that presentation up here. Man, I know I was this close to getting the cool like StreamYard slides, Jamar, yeah, like you do, set up so I could just push the button and I still don't quite have it. So almost there, almost there. By the 8th live, I'll know exactly what I'm doing, I'm sure. So let's get, here we go. All right. So some things you might not know about me. um, Before we start building your decoder ring today, I guess I should introduce myself. Yeah, I'm Sarah Lobkovich. And in addition to the work that you know me for in the strategy and OKR space, I actually wear two other hats that you might not know about, but they complement each other perfectly. I earned my board certification in health and well-being coaching by taking a really big, yucky multiple choice exam this summer. And but it was worth it because I earned my certification. Now I'm a board certified health and wellness coach, and I use that in my work with people in their careers and workplaces with a focus on career well-being and organizing for career impact. I am also, and this is the one that catches people more off guard, I am also the team principal for a professional motorcycle road racing team. So, in addition to politics, sponsor support, and crew duties in my professional motorcycle racing career, part of my role involves athlete fitness and mental game preparation. And naturally, I am the goal setting person for the team. So, this combination with health and well-being coaching and my life in professional sports has given me some pretty deep insights into high performance goal setting. Whether we're talking about your athletic pursuits or your work in the office or your health and lifestyle metrics. So, in addition to all of this, I'm a complete and total goal nerd. I've trained over 2,000 objectives and key results coaches. I lead OKR objectives and key results adoption in multi-thousand person organizations in Fortune 100 and 500 companies. And I also do OKR work with small and solo businesses as well. So that combo of skills, it sounds weird when I try and talk about it together. This is actually the first time I've tried to talk about all three together, so it's a little bit of an experiment. People who know me in one facet don't always know me in the others. But what all three have in common is they're high stakes. They're places where we have to get comfortable with change. We have to be nimble. We have to be creative because we're not in control of our sports environment. We're not in control of our work environment, and our bodies are always changing. So it sounds weird from the outside, but for me, it's just high performance, high stakes stuff that requires goal setting and behavior change support. So today, we're going to use some analogies from these other parts of my life to build your decoder ring for acronyms of goal setting, that alphabet soup of goal setting, and some of goal setting's key terms. And also, we'll talk about, and you'll see from the examples when you might use which ones. And this is risky, but I am going to say if you have acronyms in mind that I don't bring up, drop them in the chat window. If you have acronyms you have questions about, I might not know the answer, but someone else who's on the live might. So feel free, if you have questions as we go, drop those in the chat window. And like I said, I only included a handful of acronyms. So if I missed any that you want to hear about, even if I don't know today, I can follow up with my thoughts on them. Because every time I think I've learned the most relevant acronyms, new ones pop up. So here we're going to talk about definitions of some of the key acronyms. We'll talk about when you might use each of them. I'm going to show you an example of each, but instead of using business examples, which I actually think are sometimes really hard, it's hard to tell the difference between the goal types when we use business examples. I'm going to use health and sport-based examples. So for me, I don't know, whenever I use the health and body and sport-based examples, it just makes more sense to me. It's easier to see the distinctions between the goal types. So whether you are fine-tuning personal performance or leading some kind of high-stakes team, you're going to leave here with a practical toolkit for choosing and using the right goal-setting method for any situation. So you can get better faster without getting lost in the jargon. So from here, let's look at this universe of acronyms. Let me see. Let's go. There we go. So these are the acronyms that we're going to cover today. And we're going to move around this board one at a time, but it's KPIs, SMART goals, objectives and key results. We're going to talk about mandatory goals, which isn't an acronym, but it's an important distinction. We can't talk about goal setting without talking about activities or plans. And we're also going to talk about how we work toward goal achievement. So we're going to mention EOS, which I'm not an expert in, but it is something that's coming up a lot in my conversations with people, which is the Entrepreneur Operating System. We're also going to talk about rhythms of business, ROB, which I have a fun talk about worlds colliding. So I have another worlds colliding content thing happening. I think next week we're going to release it. I have an interview with an author named Yuri Kammer, and our entire episode is about what business can learn. Well, half the episode is about what business can learn from F1 and professional racing. And in his new book, he doesn't use the term rhythm of business. He used the term, I think it's rhythm of progress. And I'm like, oh, that's so good. I want to change immediately. So ROB might become ROP based on Urian's work. But I didn't drop the podcast name. That's Thinky Doers. So if you're not already a listener, tune in. It should be live early Tuesday morning on the Thinky Doers podcast. And it's a really fun one. And then the last acronym we're going to talk just a tiny bit about is Balanced Scorecard. So if you have a favorite acronym and you don't see it there, drop it in the chat window. Or if there's an acronym that you've always wondered, what on earth does this mean? Drop it in the chat window. And if I can, I'll speak to it. And if I can't, then we'll learn something together and follow up. All right. But let's dive in. So the first one we're going to talk about is activity goals. And that's because that's what most people do in terms of goal setting, is they decide what they plan to do, and that's what their focus is on. And that's not bad. There's nothing wrong. Sorry, my screen just flipped. That's not bad. There's nothing wrong with activity planning. Ultimately, if we want to achieve something, we have to do things. So activity goals are not bad. They're just incomplete on their own. And I made this slide on purpose because it shows part of the problem. I didn't count the number of items on that checklist, but 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, it's like 15 things. And I don't know about you. How many things do you have on your to-do list at any given time? I have so many that multiple pieces of software can't keep up with my to-do list. And so the issue with only relying on activity planning is when we're goal setting, and I consider that plans, not goals. Yeah, Catherine says, this is why so many of us feel hugely overwhelmed. My hope, Teresa, 6,900 things on your list. Yes, very familiar. Um, and Prati says three. Oh, she doesn't do lists. That's brilliant. Not doing lists anymore. Yeah, today is, I can't live without lists because my brain is very lossy, but you are going to learn some skills today that you might be able to use to help wrangle your lists so that we don't get as overwhelmed by our lists, because we can recognize what we're actually aiming to achieve instead of the things that we think we're going to do, because we always overestimate how much we can get done in any given bit of time. Hi, that's me. So this is where most people start, and they think of these as goals, but I think of these as well-laid plans. So these are the plans that we make, just like any other plans, where if we wake up on that day, then we might decide that we're not going to stick to our plan. And so then if this is the only kind of goal setting that we're doing is planning, then there's not much to keep us on the rails when we wake up and have a rough day and don't want to stick with our plan. So in addition to activity goals and planning, we can build on our skills here. And we're going to add in the idea of KPIs. And I went to KPIs first because KPIs are what I get asked about absolutely the most. So KPIs, or key performance indicators, that is a term that has no universal meaning. So everyone who uses that term has a different definition of what a KPI is. I'm going to try something here real quick. Nope, too small to see. Okay. Sorry, you guys are my guinea pigs today. So KPIs doesn't have a universal meaning. A lot of times I see organizations using KPIs as goals. And so I even have a client, a client I'm working with who, in their goal setting playbook before we started working together, they described KPIs as always being written as SMART goals, which we'll get to in a minute. The words, I am a words girl. It is all about semantics with me. That's an insult that I used to get a lot, and it's actually completely true. But the words of the word KPI, key performance indicator, is indicator. So when I started trying to kind of reconcile this, how do OKRs fit in to organizations' existing practices? KPIs was one of the first ones that I looked at, and I'm like, it's right there in the name. They're indicators. They're not goals. KPIs, if we use a body-based example, they're the things that we keep an eye on to make sure that we're staying healthy. If our KPIs go sideways, then we know we might need to pay attention. But they're not goals in and of themselves. They're indicators of our health. So it's things like blood pressure, or waist-hip ratio, or sleep efficiency, or the number of social plans that we make per week, the number of social plans we keep per week, resting heart rate, bone density, those sorts of things. So those are example KPIs. And KPIs are important. We'll talk about our dashboard at the very end. But KPIs are important because they're the metrics that we're going to watch. They're the ones we're going to keep an eye on. If we need to maintain a metric, we use a KPI. If we need to watch a metric because we're concerned about it, or there might be, some cause for concern, that's a KPI. And so our KPIs aren't all of the metrics under the sun. Our KPIs are the ones that we're going to watch to make sure that we're staying healthy. And I'm not going to say every time this applies to your business too, but the body and health and sport-based examples, I think if you internalize those, then it's really easy to see how this applies in the workplace. All right, so that's KPIs, key performance indicators. Yes, Catherine, indicators, not goals. That's our KPIs. I didn't know this was going to be so much fun. I was so nervous about this one because I thought it would be boring, and now I'm like super excited. So thanks to the folks that joined because that really helps. All right, so our next one is SMART goals. And I put SMART goals second because SMART goals is what I run into second as frequently as KPIs. So the first questions about SMART, or the first questions about KPIs, and then we go, well, what about SMART goals? Because those two have been implemented in a lot of organizations. And SMART is one of my personal nemesis because, again, it's all semantics with me. And I worked in environments that use SMART goal setting before I started doing this for a living. And every organization that used SMART, for one, SMART had different meanings. The words meant different, specific, measurable, those are always the same. Some places use achievable, some places use attainable for A, some places use relevant, and some places use realistic for R. I worked somewhere where they used attainable for A and R for realistic, and I was like, what is the difference? And no one could explain it to me. And then T is time bound. So SMART goals came back into my world when I was doing my training as a health and wellness coach and studying for my exams, because SMART goals are used a lot in health and wellness. And so an example of a SMART goal, they're specific, measurable, achievable or attainable, relevant or realistic, and time bound. And so an example of a SMART goal in the body-based examples might be engage in cardiovascular exercise for 30 minutes, 4 times a week for the next 3 months, tracking progress with a fitness app. So it's specific, very specific. It's measurable in terms of you can quantify the activity and say, am I doing the things that I said I plan to? That might be achievable for some people. It might not be achievable for some people. It might be attainable for some people. It might not be. It's relevant if this is your domain of concern, if improving cardiovascular exercise or improving cardiovascular health is important to you. Might be realistic. Again, achievable, attainable, realistic. Lots of confusion there. And it's time bound. So we're going to do that 30 minutes, 4 times a week for the next 3 months. So SMART goals can be really helpful. Notice that goal is probably more helpful at getting you off the couch than a vague plan or activity goal to work out more often. So SMART goals are helpful because they are specific. They do give us something to aim for. The challenge with SMART goals, and we're going to talk about mandatories in just a minute, is with SMART goals, it's a little too easy to set that goal and then have our all or nothing thinking take over with our behavior. So if we don't make a workout, then it's a little too easy to kind of fall off the SMART goal wagon and think, well, I'm going to miss this one, and then I'm going to take another day off, and then it's hard to get back on the wagon. So SMART goals work. They're good for some things. And it's basically, if you're familiar with my work, this is quantifying activity. So they use the term measurable. And that's a reason I've moved away from using the term measurable when we talk about, or measurable alone when we talk about key results. But they're measurable in terms of, did you do the thing? Have you, done the thing? And I'm trying, there are ways to write SMART goals that are actually key results. Like you could write a SMART goal that would be a key result per a technical definition of a key result. But because the definition is so broad, it's pretty rare that I actually see metrics-based SMART goals. A lot of times they're like this. It's quantifying activity. And quantifying activity is great. It gives you that clarity when what's important is that you do something a certain number of times. But doing something a certain number of times won't necessarily yield the outcome you need. So we need to think about, is what's most important that we do the thing a certain number of times? SMART goal. Is what's important that we achieve some sort of outcome? That's where OKRs are helpful. Jeffrey, I know I've looked up FAST goals and it's escaping my mind right now. So if you can drop that acronym in the chat, I'd love to see it just to jog my memory. All right. And so before we get into OKRs though, let's talk about mandatory goals. One of the principles I work with is one of the biggest issues I see in organizations is that they don't distinguish between mandatory goals or must achieves and stretch goals, where we are going into unknown territory and we can't really forecast because it's the unknown. And we still want to have a target, but setting, trying to forecast in speculative, unknown stretch territories just sets us up for disappointment. So instead of treating our stretch goals as mandatory or treating our mandatories as stretch, a lot of organizations, they just conflate the two and then no one ever knows whether something's mandatory or stretch. And so we just presume everything is mandatory because that's the only safe thing to do. That can lead to underperformance. So examples of things that might be mandatory goals in the health space: get at least 6 hours of sleep per night, drink 8 glasses. That's probably a bridge too far. I should have said drink water every day. I know the recommendation is 8 glasses, but let's just go for drinking water every day, mandatory. Take your prescribed medications as directed. Our mandatories are the things that we have to do. They're the things that if we don't do this, we're going to experience negative consequences. There might be poor outcomes. And so in our business, we've got mandatory goals. You have to pay your credit card bill. You have to make payroll. There are things where they're just must achieves. They're mandatories. I used to call these commits, but that language kind of became a challenge. It's less precise than saying mandatory or must achieve. So I use mandatory, and then I've had one of my clients adopted must achieve. So I just include that for consistency since there might be folks from there on here today. Okay, so that's mandatory goals. We want to use mandatory goal setting when something has to be achieved. And then when we set a mandatory goal, our target for that is 100% achievement. We're going to aim to get that done 100% of the time because it's that important. But then that takes us into our speculative and unknown territory. So our mandatories, we can set mandatory goals around the parts of our work or life that are predictable or known. Then we get into growth and innovation and change and parts that are unknown. And that's where OKRs become really important. Objectives and key results help us identify the targets we're aiming for when it's too uncertain to forecast. But we want to give ourselves a target to aim for that is what might be possible if everything went right. So if everything were to go amazingly well, what might be possible? I am so excited. I don't have a link for you yet, but yesterday I finally dreamt up like this during Jamar's strategy session. Actually, Jamar has an incredible membership called the Low Lift Club, and he's on the line today. So shout out to Jamar. I had an epiphany yesterday and put together a 30-minute power hour worksheet package for creating an OKR in 15 minutes and then creating a behavior change plan in 15 minutes. And that link isn't available yet, but at the end of this, I'll share the my general links, and that is how you'll be the first to hear when I get this out. I'm hoping to get it out next week. But basically, that tool is going to help you sit down when you're in one of these spaces and you need to think about what might be incredible to achieve and then break it down into objectives and key results. Those two worksheets are going to help you do that in 30 minutes. So, but before, since that's not, sorry, I was just really excited about that one. Usually everything I do is very complicated. And this one is like, bam, 2 pages, 5 boxes on each, super usable. I'm really excited about it. What that'll help you do is build an objective and key results for a territory that is one of your stretch territories, or one of the places where you're looking to grow or transform or change in uncertain territory. And the formula for an objective that I use is what's important, why does it matter? And so an example objective, along with our health and body-based examples, might be become the healthiest version of myself with age, and age with grace. So what's important? Being the healthiest version of myself. Why does it matter? I want to age with grace. That's my purpose. That's how I want to feel about aging. So that's the objective. Our objective gives us our idea of what direction we're heading in, what's important, like what's the territory that we're focused on, and why does it matter to us? Because if we only ask the first question, what's important, then it's kind of like those activity plans we started with at the beginning. It's just another thing on the checklist. But when we add the why, then it makes our objective something that means something to us. It gives us an idea of its purpose. And so that helps us stay motivated when we're challenged. It reminds us of why this goal, this objective, and the key results that support it are important when we start to get discouraged or when we need a pick-me-up. So it's like a tiny love letter from you all know the you that you are when you're setting your goals. You are your New Year's resolution best you. You are the most optimistic, I can do it, idealistic version of yourself when you're goal setting. And what matters is the you are in 45 days when everything's gone sideways and you still have to keep at it. So the objective is like a tiny love letter from your idealistic you to your future you that's going to get frustrated and challenged. Keeps you focused and inspired to keep working when things get hard, and get creative and troubleshoot when things get hard. Then our key results align to our objectives. And so our key results are our measures, but I'm going to say not just measures, not just quantifiable. There are empirical data-based metrics or measures. They are things that can be empirically measured and quantified. And in that, I include data that we get from our systems, but I also include things that we can reliably observe or notice. So if you don't have a bunch of instrumentation in your business, there are things that happen that are important that you can count. And that sounds like quantifying activity, but quantifying activity is quantifying your own activity. When I say we can write a KR about what you observe in your business or what you notice in your business, that's talking about other people's activity. So I can't think of a body-based one right off the bat, but one of the examples that I used early on in my business, I had a key result around hearing clients say the word ease in their feedback about working with me. So that's not an instrumented business metric. That's something that when we get our feedback surveys, we do a search for the term ease and we see how many people mentioned ease or easy. When I do my, at the end of a teaching day, I'd look at the chat window and I'd look at the transcript and we'd say, did we see the word ease or easy and how many people were there? So that key result wasn't a business metric. It wasn't instrumented, but it was something I could observe. And then it was really important for me because when that number went up, it meant my materials were getting better for my target and more useful. So that's what, when I say key result, don't stop listening just because you might not have business metrics. If you write one key result like that one of, I want to increase the number of times I hear the word ease in client feedback, if you write that one key result, you will be shocked at what a difference a single key result like that can make for how you work and in your results. But back to our body-based examples. So we have our objective, become the healthiest version of myself to age with grace. Now we've got our key results that we layer in. And key results sometimes are KPIs turned into goals. So that's what we have here. Reduce my blood pressure from 140/70 to 130/80. Reduce my A1C, which is a diabetes marker, from 5.8 to 5.6. Increase VO2 max, it's cardiovascular efficiency metric, from 35 to 40. I actually didn't fact check if that is a right number, so don't quote me on that one. but increase our VO2 max from our start value to our finish value. I usually write them as, increase, decrease, or improve a metric by a % change from A to B, but I kept these a little simpler for this one. So that's our OKRs. Our OKRs are, we're going to set stretch goals for our uncertain territory. We're going to recognize that they take us into uncertain territory. We're going to be really curious about how we do on those. We're not going to beat ourselves up about it. We're going to get curious and see what we learn because our OKRs are about experimentation and continuous learning. All right, we're in the home stretch. So BSC is balanced scorecard. And I haven't, learned the fine points of balanced scorecard, but I've worked with clients who use balanced scorecard. And so balanced scorecard is when we have that holistic dashboard. That's where we decide what are the KPIs that we need to see every day? What are our key results that we need status on every day? What are our most important things we need to have on that dashboard? And so here in our example, that might be something that includes our most important physical health metrics, mental health metrics, social well-being measures, and socioeconomic resource measures, because socioeconomics play a huge part in health and well-being. And so that's our dashboard, is our balanced scorecard. But it doesn't have everything on it. It has what's important on it. And then our ROB, our rhythm of business, or as Yuri in Commerce says, rhythm of progress, is all of the things that make up the culture of performance in your work. So people think of rhythm of business, if they've heard that term before, as these are the meetings that we're going to do on a cadence. What are the meetings we're going to do weekly, monthly, quarterly, annually? But I think bigger about your rhythm of business, because your rhythm of business is really your culture. It's your meetings, yes. It's also your communication norms, your asynchronous communication norms, your habits, your rhythms for learning and feedback, your ways of recognizing each other and what cadence that's on. So I think much more broadly about rhythm of business, but every business has one. And so, you might think you don't, but even if you don't think you do, there are elements of a rhythm of business in how you work. I have a toolkit for this. I don't have the link with me, but I'll share it in social media, because I have a rhythm of business toolkit that can help with identifying and then improving your goal attainment focus in your rhythm of business. So I'll share that out too. So in our health routines, our rhythm of business might be that daily morning stretch and evening walk, and then our weekly meal prep on Sundays, and then our monthly check-in on our what's our blood pressure trend been for the month, because blood pressure varies a lot by day, so we look at trends, we don't look at individual measures. And then do I have my quarterly check with my rheumatologist? And do I have my annual check with my primary care doctor? So those are our rhythms of business or rhythms of physical health. And then EOS is Entrepreneur Operating System. Jessica Lee is someone who's come into my life fairly recently. She's amazing. She's a EOS consultant, which was just perfect timing because EOS is something I get asked about a lot, and it's not a framework that I've become expert in because I got my hands full with OKRs. But Jessica Lee is also she recently completed my OKR coach training. And so she also is coming on Thank You Doers. We've got an episode recorded that'll come out in a couple weeks about EOS and its applications and why you might consider, if you're an EOS practitioner, why you might consider also implementing OKRs and specifically key results. But EOS is a framework that helps small and mid-sized organizations organize around like a big picture system of vision and people and data and issues and process and how to get traction and achievement. So I'm not an EOS expert, but I wanted to mention it because that's one of the acronyms that comes up a lot. And in the kind of trying to make an analogy with health, I feel like EOS is like our family health system. So what are the family's R&Rs for health? Who plans meals? Who organizes daily active time? Who makes sure we get out to the park when the weather's nice? Who schedules the doctor's appointments? And, what's the quarterly family rhythm? What's the annual family rhythm? Do we have an annual kind of vacation or getaway that we can spend to take a little time to check in on our health and well-being as a family? But that would also include your healthcare providers. It's like, what's the system? So that's different than rhythm of business, because rhythm of business is more about the mechanics, and EOS is broader and includes the roles and responsibilities and more to it. So, all right, home stretch team. So that's it. That's all the acronyms I'm going to throw at you. It's a lot, but I hope that helps kind of break them down so you can see when you might use which ones in your business or work. If you have any questions, I would love to hear them in the chat window. Like there might be something where you're wrestling with which goal type you might use, or you might have another acronym. I saw Jeffrey shared FAST, frequently discussed, ambitious, specific, and transparent. Oh, that's a good one. I like that. That actually is really, that could be like that could be like OKRs and FAST. Like people try and put OKRs and SMART goals together, but OKRs actually align really, really nicely to that FAST acronym: frequently discussed, ambitious, specific, and transparent. Because when we're doing OKRs, well, that's what they are. So that's a great one, Jeffrey. I'll add that into my toolkit. But that's our alphabet soup of goal setting for today. If I do want to say, if you made it here today, I really appreciate it. And then also, I need some volunteers. So next week, when I do this, it's a live OKR audit. And I have a audit that I am prepared to overview for folks so that you can see a large system of OKRs and how I audit those. If I get live participants, though, we'll do something live instead. So if you want some free help with your OKRs, there's a chance next week. There's another chance in November for before and after case study examples. So if you'd like some free help with your OKRs, hit me up. And then in between, so next week is the live OKR audit. Then I've got an AMA on connecting strategy to execution. We've got why you shouldn't cascade OKRs to individuals. Do this instead on November 8th, and then OKRs before and after to wrap up the series on November 15th. You can find all that info at findrc.co/goal Fridays. And if you would like to volunteer for some free OKR help, I am the nicest coach in the world when it comes to feedback because I'm really sensitive about feedback. So these are fun, supportive, learning focused free coaching sessions. They're not scary or hard. You're not going to walk out of this feeling bad. You're going to walk out of this feeling good if you do volunteer. I can confidently make that commitment. All right. And then if anything I've said today is helpful to you or you want to learn more, join the pre-launch list for my print books. I have the No BS OKR workbook is already available for download today in PDF form for $19 on my website, sarahlobkovich.com. The print version of the workbook and my full-length business book, You Are a Strategist, use No BS OKRs to get big things done, will be out in December is what we're aiming for. So you can join the pre-launch list at youareastrategist.com. Find out everything by joining my mailing list at findrc.co/newsletter. So with that, I am going to stick around for a few minutes if there are any questions. Mostly just thank you all. I really didn't know if anyone would show up for this one, so I'm grateful that some folks were interested and took the time. And then I'm going to look at the chat window right now because I see a couple questions have come through. So, oops, wrong one. All right. So Prathi says, when I try to talk about SMART goals for social media when setting them for clients. Yeah. So social media, the way that I would coach Prathi is if you want to focus on clients doing something. So if you and I are working together and you're like, Sarah, you're going to sit down and create social content twice a week and no excuses. And you're going to create 3 posts every week and schedule them, so basically there's no way to get stuck in this. You're going to set a goal, you're going to do a thing. I'm going to be able to see what that thing is. So I can hold you accountable to it. If you want your clients to do something, SMART goals are great. So you can use a SMART goal to set up a quantified activity with those time boundaries, and enforceability so that they can, that's especially as coaches. That's one of the reasons coaches use SMART goals is when we're in a scenario where clients need accountability, SMART goals are great for that. If you have a client that wants to improve the performance of their content, so we want to improve our click-through rate bounced the mic. We want to improve our click-through rate on social media, or I want to improve my social visit view to amplification, like retweet or reshare rate. Those are things I would set key results around or create OKRs around because those are not within our control. So we want to reserve the right to try and even fail in the pursuit of learning for those. So I could see a situation where you'd have an objective as an overarching what's most important and why it matters for a client. And then you might have some SMART goals on one side of the page saying what they're going to need to do. And then you could even provide accountability. And then some learning goals on the other side, some experimental performance improvement goals as key results. And that would make a really useful kind of clear set of goals for your clients. That's a great scenario. Catherine, awesome. So we'll get you into one of the slots for OKR help. That was a great question, Prathi. Thank you. And then Catherine asks, do you have a favorite framework for the all or nothing brains among us? I am so glad you asked that, Catherine. That's actually, I think, one of the reasons I got so in love with objectives and key results, and specifically key results. It sounds counterintuitive, but for our all or nothing brains, or brains that wrestle with focus or hyper focus, when we plan based on activity, all we do is feel bad all the time. Because we also, folks that fall into that category, tend to have issues with time awareness, or the perception of time. So the other day, my big nemesis, I need to stop doing my own website work, because like if I sat down to work on a Google tagging issue. I sat down at 9 in the morning, and the next time I looked up, it was 7 o'clock at night. And I felt like I'd lost, it was like being abducted by aliens. So when we focus on activity goal setting, when we're wired differently, all it does is make us mostly it mostly just makes us feel bad about ourselves, because all the things that make our brains awesome and special also make it really hard for those brains to make a plan and stick to it in the way that checklists and activity plans require. But with objectives and key results, we can identify what is actually ultimately important to try to achieve. It's speculative. It's an experiment. It's not the right answer. We're not going to write the correct key result. There is no right and wrong. Done is better than perfect. So when we write those, what would amazing look like in terms of measurable results, goals, and then start to work toward them, it's a wild thing that happens, that if we give ourselves room to fail on goals, we're going to put it out there and we're going to try our best and we're going to see what we learn. That leverages all the most amazing parts of brains like ours, because it lets us get curious. So instead of all or nothing being something where we fall off the wagon one day and then we stay off the wagon and we feel bad because of our all or nothing, with key results, if we have a key result we're working toward, and then we fall off the wagon and we aren't working toward it, then instead of beating ourselves up, we get to ask ourselves, that's interesting. Hey, self, why aren't we working on that? Let's get curious. What's going on? Can I change my approach? Have I gotten bored with what I planned? Do I need to shift it up and get some more novelty into how I'm working? So that flexibility that key results give us to adapt our how as we go based on changing circumstances is one of the biggest powers of key results. But it's especially useful for those of us who are neurodivergent or who struggle with executive functioning for whatever reason, because it lets us remember and remind ourselves what we decided was important to work toward. We can remind ourselves it's an experiment. We're learning. We're going to achieve more by experimenting toward that key result than if we made ourselves a plan and the all or nothing derailed us. So our net gain is going to be better if we set that key result, stay curious, work toward it, see what we learn, and iterate and improve. I honestly believe that's one of the reasons I got so deep into OKRs, is because other forms of planning and goal setting just didn't work with my brain. And key results, I can always write something. I can always answer the question, what would be a really incredible measurable outcome? And then figure out a way to give myself math to see progress. And the minute I have math, I'm just curious. It's data, it's information that then we can assess and iterate based on. So I'm a huge fan of key results for neurodivergent brains. That's kind of my mission, is for more neurodivergent brains to learn about key results and what they can do for us. All right, team. I'm sorry I kept you over, but those were Really, really great questions. Thank you so much. And I really appreciate, like I said, I didn't know if anyone was going to show up for this one. So I appreciate that folks joined and found it useful. You know where to find me. If saralobkevich.com is too hard to spell, you can use the shortcut of findrc.co. And I'll look forward to seeing y'all next week. Thanks. Bye bye.